Welcome to the Rise to Shine podcast with Noelle Kustas, where we ignite the spark to discover your favorite self. It is time to get real, ladies. Hello, welcome to the Rise to Shine podcast. I'm your host, Noelle Kustas, and I am so excited about today's conversation because we are going to explore the power of healing, connection, and rising in our relationships. My guest today, I'm super excited about it because we were just talking behind the scenes that this is a full circle moment. We met several years ago through some coaching certification and through some classes with one of our mentors who you've heard on this podcast. And we are just so excited that we get to connect here and be together. So today I want to introduce you to Becky Aste, and she is a trauma-informed somatic relationship coach. And she's also the host of Your Breakthrough Blueprint, which is a globally ranked podcast that's helping women transform their relationships from the inside out. So Becky discovered the power of somatic healing and really had this breakthrough that changed everything. We're going to talk about it today because I think it's just fascinating, and she is just so, a wealth of knowledge over here. So we are super excited. Her mission is to help ambitious women clear emotional blocks and step into thriving connections. So if you've ever felt stuck in relationships or wanted deeper connections, maybe wondering why traditional healing methods aren't working, this episode is going to be for you. So Becky, welcome.
Thank you, Noelle, so much. And yeah, just to thank you for that full circle moment. I met you when I was on the cusp of wanting to stay in a career that was unaligned, and I was thinking about going for this marriage business. And you were one of the people that deposited hope and faith in me that I needed to trust my intuition at that time. So this is super special to be on your show all these years later.
I know. I love it. I love it so much. And this is, part of your journey is definitely near to my heart when it comes to relationships for lots of different reasons. And I'm just so proud of you for the work that you're doing and that you took that leap of faith, because obviously it is paying off. So definitely want to get into it today. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? Because like I said, I'm so excited for everyone to get to know you.
Yeah, so I have been married for going on 13 years and have two amazing kids, 8 and 5. And I spend my days running a business called I Do Breakthrough. And I work with women who are on the verge of divorce, have been through a lot of relationship trauma, are terrorized by the question of should I stay or should I go? And they've tried all the mainstream things, EMDR, talk therapy, couples counseling, and are spinning their wheels at best, some of them re-traumatized at worst. So that's what the woman I love to meet and work with, because it's where I was. I was separated on the verge of divorce, and somatic work was the last minute game changer that took us from dying to thriving. And so I just ever since have wanted to scream it through, from the rooftops and be able to get this healing modality into as many hands as possible.
Definitely. And clearly that is what I am sure is fueling your passion, is that you were able to save your marriage through this. And so we definitely, can't wait to hear that story. But I would love for you to share, because I know that there's a lot of women in here that are going, what is somatic breath work? What are they talking about? So could you just tell us, what that is and how it plays a role in, healing, moving trauma out of the body, just all of the things.
Yeah, that word somatic is a buzzword. Some might know what it
Yeah.
is. Others are like, I've heard of it, but what actually? So when you hear the word somatic, it just means body. The root word soma means body. And so with all of the mainstream traditional approaches to healing that we've seen, whether it's relationships or trauma in the past, couple of generations, it is pretty much from the neck up, not really addressing or getting into the body. It's talking in traditional talk therapy. It's, listening, practice active listening in couples counseling. It's reading, whether you're scrolling the internet, up late at night, Google searching, like, should I stay or should I go?
Yeah.
Or just binging podcasts. All of this is great. I do all of those things still, but it's missing out on the entire 80% of your body. So what we know, and this is a popular book that's been on the rise and people being aware of it, but The Body Keeps the Score is a book written by Bessel van der Kolk, who has really brought light to how the traumas that we've lived through, our body, our physiological system actually has imprints and keeps track of what we've lived through, and it comes out in different symptoms. So most obvious example of that, you think of war veterans with PTSD. They were maybe in active duty decades ago, but 4th of July, when they hear fireworks, they have panic attacks as if that event from 3 decades ago is happening right now. So you don't have to be a veteran to experience this with emotional trauma you've been through, whether it's, abuse, abandonment, infidelity, that can show up present day, even if it's decades later. And gosh, your partner's phone ringing and you having a panic moment of
Mhm.
who's texting him, like who is it really,
Wow.
or whatever the triggers are going on in your life. So if the body keeps the score and we really want to heal holistically, we've got to go into the body to move trauma out.
Mhm. So good, and of course I go, gosh, I wish I would have known about this years ago when I was going through a very hard and difficult divorce. And, we were, same thing. We were doing all of the things. We were going to couples therapy. I was reading the books. Podcast wasn't even really a thing at that point that I was super familiar with, but it was all of the therapies that I knew how to do. And so
Yeah.
it was like, okay, so let's tap into all of that. But, again, unfortunately, that did not work out for us. And I can't help but to wonder when you hear things like this, you realize that it is so much deeper and there's so many things happening beneath the surface and within our body. And we just think it's the stress or, I mean, I feel like, you just kind of put it into a different category, but what's really happening beneath the surface when healing isn't clicking through all of those other, talk therapies and books and things like that?
Yeah, so if we're feeling stuck, spinning our wheels, and really only addressing the neck up, we're
Mhm.
staying caught in our heads. And we're a society that lives in our heads. I mean, we're very intellectualized society and information-driven society. Even with AI coming out, whether you hate it or you love it, like the whole point is to get more information quickly. So that's all great, but what can happen is when we've been through trauma is we can get so stuck in our heads. We get
Mhm.
stuck in intrusive thoughts and ruminating thoughts. Trauma does not allow us to live in the present. It's either replaying the past or future tripping about the future, but it's this inability to actually breathe, let go, live here now without feeling like, when's the next shoe gonna drop? When's the rug gonna get pulled out underneath me? And so, even the most favorite question that people ask when they're going into therapy sessions is why? Like, why am I feeling this? Why are these things happening? Why did he do that? Or whatever it is. And that question is actually really ineffective and unproductive because it keeps us trapped in our head even more. We're trying to figure out the reason why and get to this answer that honestly, most of the time, even if we had it, what would happen then? Like, would that actually provide the relief that you want? Would it actually change the situation?
Mhm.
And so, what's so cool about nervous system regulation, somatic work, kind of similar category there, is we're learning how to just be present with what's actually happening. We don't have to figure out the why. We actually don't even have to go backward in order to heal forward. I think that's a myth that you have to open all the, skeletons in the closet, can of worms from your past if you want to move forward. I don't think that's true. I think you can work with what's presently true. Truth is, for whatever reason, I'm having panic attacks. I'm unable to sleep. I'm having eczema breakouts. I'm constantly ruminating. And so let's just be with what is and learn how to create safety in the body so that we can be able to be present to our life and then have the clarity, the wisdom, the intuition be able to come through to know what next step decisions are meant to be made.
Oh my gosh, so much to unpack there. I have so many questions. And I think, going back, just because if I rewind just a little bit, being that I do want to stay in our moment, but just talking about your story and just kind of giving that foundation of what that looks like. I mean, your story is super powerful. So when you were, because I'm assuming you were, and you can tell us more, you were going through the traditional therapies, and you said this was kind of like that last ditch effort. So can you take us back maybe to the moment when you felt like your marriage was maybe even beyond saving? And what was that turning point that led you to somatic
Mhm.
healing? And then what did that start to do for you?
Yeah, so our dynamic was the classic, if anybody knows attachment theory, the labels are, which I'm not a big labels fan, but the
Right.
anxious, the attached, and the avoidant. So in other words, I was the one chasing energetically, and he was the one running. I
Mhm.
wanted closeness, connection, let's talk it out. He was overwhelmed by that, needed space, independence, autonomy. So it was like this cat and mouse for a decade.
Yeah.
And it showed up in different toxic coping mechanisms that brought us to our breaking point with codependency and addiction and betrayal and trust broken. And so we got to a point where we both were like, this is really, really unhealthy. How did we get here? And we actually both decided a separation was best, which was more terrifying for me, being the more anxiously attached. Like, separation, as far as I knew, was just next stop to divorce. I was terrified of
Right.
that. But I also was like, okay, I'm waving the white flag. My sleep is all messed up. My nervous system is on fire. I'm screaming at my kids. Like, I'm in constant anxiety. I can't remember the last time I wasn't triggered.
Mhm.
So we made the hard decision to separate. He moved in with his mom. And that just really revealed my deepest wounds, even from childhood. The first time I remember being in the house alone, the first night he was at his mom's and the kids were asleep, and I was like, I am really alone. This house is so quiet. I don't hear his footsteps. I don't hear his, voice, his breath. I can't touch him. I can't. And so it was this aha moment for me because it brought me back to my teen years when my dad suddenly died of a heart attack. And that was that wound of, oh my gosh, for the first time in my life, my daddy, and I was a daddy's girl, I can't hear him, I can't touch him, I can't text him. His breath, his all of it was gone. So it was like, whoa, okay, this is the wound I'm actually working with. And it led me to what one does, when their relationship is on the brink of falling apart. I'm Instagram scrolling at like 2 in the morning because I can't sleep. And I come across a coach who I just can't tell you why, but I was very drawn in and binging her content, and I felt like she was telling my story. And there was this feeling of you're meant to be in her space no matter what. And that was the only thing that was clear at that time in my life when so much was unclear. That one piece of clarity was like, just get in her space. So that was my
Mhm.
first ever investment in an online coach, and she was my first introduction to somatic work. And
Mhm.
so that ended up being her little 8-week program, what took us from awful to finally gasping for air, healing, and then on the path to ending up thriving, which we still are like, how? This
Wow.
is kind of crazy.
It's such a, I mean, it's a beautiful story in the end for sure, because so often I feel like when we're in a marriage or long-term relationship and we start to feel disconnected, and I feel like oftentimes we are focusing on what the other person is or isn't doing. And so for me, when I'm hearing this, it's you that, you found this coach, and, for whatever reason, you knew that this was the space that you were supposed to be in. And, I think that it's so important to encourage women that when you're going through things like this, and I'd love for you to maybe talk about this, of how we need to focus back to ourselves in
Mm-hmm.
a healthy way. So, how can we shift that focus when you're going through the hard and you're, going through this? I mean, it sounds like your husband was on board to, also make it work and but was it like that from the beginning, or was it you doing some of the work first and then being able to come together? How did that look for you?
A really important collective question. It's really common. One of the first things women ask is, can I do this without my husband on board? And
Mhm.
especially with dynamics where one partner is anxious, usually the women that I work with, and their partner is more avoidant, they're the ones putting in the effort and seeking out the therapists
Right.
and kind of carrying the lead on that. And so that's how it was for me at first. He was pretty set on, I think this is over and I'm not interested in healing. That overwhelms me. And I felt very alone. I felt like the only one, spending every waking minute listening to every podcast I could, squeezing in an ounce of healing to try to crack the code. And so when I first did the somatic program, it was the first time I was able to actually feel in my body detachment from his behavior and outcome. Not overnight. It wasn't this like, aha fix. But I went from just intellectually knowing, oh, you're supposed to detach, right? And like they're their own person and codependency doesn't work. Like I knew that because of how much work I had done from the neck up. But this was the first time I felt I can breathe and taste and just sip at first peace apart from him. I can actually feel safe letting my mind go to the possible outcome that we might not work out. And I've never been able to feel that before.
Mhm.
So it's a total invitation to women now that I work with that let's get our power back and learn how to be, safe in our own nervous system, in our own body, our own spirit, learn how to navigate triggers practically because they're popping up left and right now, and then learn how to take our power back because most of us have been through situations that have rendered us powerless or things that were outside of our control happen to us
Mhm.
and would have every right to wear the victim label, but these women are not wanting to stay there. They want to take their power back and have clarity again and just peace no matter the outcome.
Right.
So I tell women I'm kind of the funny marriage coach because I don't push for what do you call it? I don't push for the couple staying together. Like I
Right.
really have no agenda other than to point you back to your own intuition because the victory we're celebrating at the end is a woman getting out of an abusive, toxic relationship that she just didn't have enough safety in her system or support or courage to walk away from. And then other times we're celebrating, oh my God, you changed that toxic dance and your husband rose with you. So I tell
Mhm.
everyone when you dive into this kind of work that gets to the deep subconscious, cellular, spiritual level, it is a win-win situation. Best case scenario, you heal and you call your husband up. Other best case scenario, you heal and you call him out. But either way, you win because you learn how to stop self-abandoning.
I love that so much because, like you said, there's no agenda at the end. And this really is doing the work and doing some healing within yourself and having, my thought is it's a lot of self-trust to really get to a place of healing and deepening our own connection with ourselves, because oftentimes we don't even see or notice or recognize what's going on within ourselves to be able to put ourselves as our best version out into the world, and I love that. I love that there are different ways and approaches to this, but it ends up being a win-win. And I love that because you are going to win in the outcome of this and being able to rebuild that self-trust within yourselves, let alone with your partner. I mean, if we're not trusting ourselves, I can't imagine how we're going to trust our partners. So going into that, you're doing the work and you are really strengthening that nervous system regulation. um, when you're doing that somatic work, so I guess the first question is, because my mind is just going all over the place, I'm so intrigued, but when you're doing the work, um, and you're kind of trying to, regulate that nervous system, what happens, how does that look when you're triggered, like by a partner or something going on, whether it's, maybe it's just a disagreement, or maybe you're feeling unseen, or even like you had mentioned, old wounds that start to resurface. How do you work with women to help them respond instead of have a reaction to that?
Yeah, really good question. So we on the program I run, it's called Root to Rise. There's like a very specific flow and kind of stages we go through. The first thing that we work on is dissolving shame, because almost every woman walking into this work is swirling in a shame storm. And I tell them it doesn't matter how awesome the tools are that I'm about to give you. If you are in a shame storm, everything is going to go in one ear out the other. So let's learn how to dissolve that and embody radical self-compassion, radical self-acceptance from the get-go. Second thing we do is establish safety in the nervous system. So just some come in with zero somatic toolkit, like no resources. Others have a good amount. Others are very well resourced. So just making sure they have that baseline of how do I feel safe in the present moment? And sometimes that's grounding tools. Sometimes it's, like you mentioned earlier, somatic breathing. It's learning these different resources to feel safety in the body, to tap into moments at first. It doesn't always like last long, it sips and tastes. But what does it actually feel like to breathe deep and easy, to like be just here right now? And to feel your muscles just release, if even for a moment. Then from there, we start working on triggers and what that looks like practically, which majority of the women are like, I don't remember the last time I wasn't triggered. I'm triggered all day, every day. And so it's just offering them to practice those new resources and tools in their somatic belt to use in the moment of trigger. So what that looked like for me practically was my favorite one that tended to get me back into the present was the five senses. Super simple, easy, kids can do it, but just in a moment of trigger, naming five things you can hear, five things you can see, four things you can hear, three things you can touch, two things you can smell, one thing you can taste. And I would
Mm.
just do that on repeat and practice and be like mad at first because I felt like it was so juvenile. I was like, really? I've done all these deep intensive and subconscious rewiring, and I just paid this woman 5K to tell me to do the five senses. And I was mad at first. And even her telling me how to do self-compassion in the moments, like hand over heart, deep inhales, speaking compassionately to myself. I just wanted to punch her in the face at first, to be completely honest. Because I was very much the high achiever, the pull yourself up by your strap.
Yeah.
I was like, give me the masculine answer. So for me, it was a practice of learning how to slow down and how to really be with myself in moments of trigger. So for other women, that might be some favorites or just box breathing. Sometimes if it's high anxiety or anger, literally shaking your body, like getting up and moving instead of trying to hold it together and stay on that Zoom meeting and push through, but like literally taking a break, going and shaking it out, screaming into a pillow, sometimes punching a mattress. There's a lot of contained ways that energy gets trapped in our body because of just the society we live in and the expectations we have to keep it together, when it can be as simple as screaming your lungs out in a car. So depending on what nervous system state people are at, there's different tools I'll suggest to them, but those are just some examples of how to work through triggers in the moment.
So good. And again, I think it's so important to give women the permission, because I'm like you. When I started, hearing more of this stuff, like at first I was very turned off by it, I guess is what I would say, because I thought, oh, this is just all that like woo-woo stuff that people talk about. And is that really something that's sustainable? Are you really going to do it? And then when I was introduced to it and really started the practice of it and started even as simple as the box breathing, like
Hmm.
that has been a game changer for me. Whenever I start to feel anxious or before I go to speak on a stage or any of those things, that is the first thing that I start to do just to start to calm myself. And I mean, there's even times that in the middle of the night when my head starts to race and I wake up in the middle of the night and I've got all those ruminating thoughts, that's where I go, you know? And so learning those simple tools and then going to the hand over your heart and being able to speak to yourself in a compassionate way. I mean, again, this is what I'm teaching my clients, but I remember at the beginning feeling like, really? Come on, you know? But
Yes.
now being able to look years later and be able to look hindsight and go, man, if I wasn't doing some of these things that we think are so simple, I don't know where I would be. You know, I'd be grasping for all the, things that weren't necessarily tangible. They were, like you said, it was more about being in my head, trying to talk myself out of it, as opposed to using and like really connecting to the body. So I feel like that is just so good to be able to reassure women that there are other ways and to be open to them, and some might feel weird at the beginning. I always feel like there's going to be some that are going to feel a little awkward at first and maybe some you're going to connect with more than others, but I do feel like as you're speaking I go, wow, I was just thinking, I automatically went to somatic breath work, but there's so much more than just that. It's really that whole body work. And one thing I notice, and this is something I'd love to ask you, is one thing I notice that even me tapping into some of this, I notice that my kids start to tap into this as well, and I find myself saying these things, and then they'll turn around and correct me and go, Mom, what about your breathing? What about, So, how does healing ourselves, in your opinion, how does that impact the next generation? And what are you noticing the shifts as far as women that have done this type of work? How are they able to show up for their families and in their relationships doing this deep healing work?
That's the good stuff. Because, like, what brought me and what brings the women that I work with into this work is their biggest dumpster fire in their life is the relationship. That's the one that they're thinking about the most, trying to fix. But then my favorite part is when they get kind of that fire put out and they've gotten to a place of peace and clarity and connection again. And then they start to see it trickle into their parenting and their business and their money wounds and their spirituality. So, one of the first ways I started to see it trickle into my parenting was when my kids were even younger, then they were having tantrums. And I'm like, let me pull out my somatic tools to them instead of trying to coach and talk them through it like I normally do. And it's like, durr, light bulb. Like, I'm just, no wonder they're stuck. They're going from the neck up. Let me try getting into the body. So I would do the five senses with my kids. In the middle of their tantrum, I'd be like, Ollie, can you name five things on your wall? And he was at first stunned, like, you've never done this before. What's happening? And he's
Right.
naming Captain America poster, like Dragon Ball Z toy. And all of a sudden, you see him start to slow down and get out of his head and screaming. So I just started doing these tools that were working with me, with them. And now my kids know I call them the five F bombs of somatic healing. So most of us have heard of fight or flight, but they know all the F's: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop. And we wrote like a children's book, even of a family of foxes who are in all different responses. And so now when they're triggered, I'll ask them, like, which F word are you in? And they'll be able to name it, even my 5-year-old daughter. So, I mean, that's what revs my engine, gets me even more inspired, because this is more than just us and our relationship. It's literally like what everyone's trying to do, which is break generational trauma and do better for the next generation.
So, so true. I love that. And I couldn't agree more because that has probably been the most rewarding thing that I have noticed through just doing some self-development work and diving into this. And now, like I had told you before we hopped on here, my daughter, as getting her master's in clinical psychology, she's also realizing that there's so much more out there. And I think, actually, I know she has expressed to me that through my work, she has seen some different modalities where she's like, how can I bring that into my practice? Because that is what works for her as well. Just even she's very into grounding and a lot of those grounding techniques. And man, again, for someone who is anxious, that has been a game changer for her. And I think that the more we're talking about this and making it normalized, that you don't have to just be in our head, and we're so good at over analyzing and trying to figure it all out, when sometimes it's just about taking a step back and going, okay, I need to notice all of this here, and so I really do appreciate so much of this. And I'm also curious, for someone who may not be at the point of their relationship is coming to an end and they're in this like complete, chaos, because I know how that feels when you're on the brink and you're, in even potentially in a separation or whatever. But I'm feeling like there's so many women that also just go through seasons, of feeling emotionally numb in their marriages. And I talk to a lot of midlife moms who are trying to figure out their own identity at this stage of life. And so their relationship kind of becomes, I don't know, on the back burner a little bit,
Yeah.
I guess I would say. So with this type of work, what would you say would be the first step to reigniting like that emotional intimacy again, even if those kinds of things feel lost?
Yeah, it's so good you bring that up because there can be two reasons for disconnection. Sometimes it's big blow up, big T trauma.
Mhm,
Sometimes it's like we haven't had any kind of trauma at all, like no conflict. And intimacy does need a level of conflict. I
mhm,
always give the dance, the tango, as an example. Like
mhm,
what makes the tango so passionate and intimate and beautiful is not just because it's all easy and flowy, it's because there is an element of conflict and tension and you feel it. And
mhm,
so, that can happen on the other side of the pendulum with a lot of couples where it's just like, there's nothing major, but I'm just kind of like bored, disconnected. And so I have clients too that come into the program like that. It's not their marriage that's on fire, but they're
okay,
just feeling disconnected from self.
mhm,
And just given the society that we live in, kind of modern day pace of life, how overstimulated we are, overbooked, how much technology and there's so much buzzing that leads us to this disembodied state, like we are just in our heads and strategizing and going through the motions versus really being a human being who experiences these felt sense at home in ourselves sensations. And so
mhm,
if you're feeling disconnection on that side in your relationship, this work is just as much, if not more, applicable because it's learning how to come back into touch with yourself. And we can
mhm,
only be as in touch with others as we are in touch with ourselves. That
mhm,
definition of intimacy, where it's into me, you see, you can only go as deep with someone as you are deep in yourself. And so, what I find with those clients is because they're just learning this for themselves, they're finding out new things that they're excited about themselves. And they're having these breakthroughs and these kind of reawakened experiences of, I feel excited to be alive again. And I'm starting to think about my purpose. And there's more, content for conversations with their husband, more opportunities, new opportunities for connection than have been there for a long time. And I find in those types of relationships, sometimes intimacy, bedroom blocks are a real thing, not because of trauma necessarily, but sometimes it's either spiritual and religious trauma. They grew up in maybe a toxic purity culture, has nothing to do with the marriage itself, but they've
right.
got some wounds there, some blocks they may not even be aware of yet. And doing nervous system somatic work is bringing life again to the bedroom again for the first time in decades.
Yeah. So Yeah, so good, so good, and so important, and I love that you're working with those clients as well, because I see it so often. And I love just the analogy that you gave for that. It's awesome. If there was one message that you wanted every woman listening to walk away with today, what one truth um, could you give that would change how she sees herself or her relationship? What would that be?
What just came up when you said that was actually the last words my dad ever said to me. We were talking on AIM Instant Messenger the night before he passed. Do you remember that? Did you have a screen
Oh my
name?
God, so crazy. I haven't heard of that in forever.
Do you remember your screen name?
Oh my gosh. I don't remember my screen. I'm gonna have to go back and look because I know I could find it somewhere. I'll remember.
Gotta let me know. I was like suds in a bucket 7, but I was talking to my dad, and the last words he ever left me with were, "You are unique and special. Factories make the same products and they all look the same, but God made you unique with a unique set of spiritual gifts and thumbprint to leave on this earth. And I love you," was the gist of it. And so I just feel led to share that with whoever's listening, whether you had a healthy dad or not in your life. I want to give that message to you today that if you're hearing it, you're meant to hear it for a divine purpose, and you are unique and special. There's nobody with your voice, your unique gifts, and your unique thumbprint that you're meant to leave on this planet. So I love you, whoever's listening, and just grateful for being here, Noelle.
Oh, I love that, Becky. So good. I just feel like it's such an incredible conversation, and I think it's so important. After having this conversation, I just feel like you sharing all of this wisdom and your journey, it really just even brings me to more curiosity and to really go even deeper, because I think that there is, so much work to be done. And I know that both of, you and I both have this mission of wanting to help women because we've been in some really hard places. And so that's what I love to bring to this podcast is different ways that people can be introduced to people like you. So I would love, I know that there's so much that people have been able to take away from this. And I really hope every woman that's listening feels empowered to explore healing in a new way and knowing that there is more out there for you. So if you loved today's episode, be sure to connect with Becky, follow her podcast. You've got a podcast. Tell us a little bit about that before we head off. What can you tell us about your podcast?
It's called Your Breakthrough Blueprint, and it's my avenue of just not talking about marriage and only marriage all day. So, this is how somatic work can lead to breakthroughs in your health, wealth, parenting, spirituality, relationships, purpose, and more. So, I have guests on, experts in every topic, do solo episodes, and I love it.
Oh, so good. And it is definitely a fantastic episode. You are killing it over in that space. And I love that. So definitely check out the incredible work that she's doing. And of course, we will have everything in the show notes for you to be able to be in touch and share it with a friend. If you feel like there is someone out there that needs to hear this message, please share it, because that is how we are exposed to all of this information, and it kind of cuts out the noise of us trying to figure it out ourselves. So as always, I am so grateful you're here. Keep rising, keep shining, and know the best is right here waiting for you today. And thank you again so much, Becky. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you, Noelle.
Thanks for joining me here today. Your presence means the world to me. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider leaving a rating and review, and don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Head to the show notes and let's connect. Rise to Shine Co. is ready to support you in coaching, collaboration, life tips, or even a coffee chat. Until next time, keep shining, my friends.